Hey, check out this new yarn I got. It's a lovely colour, isn't it? Acrylic. Yeah. Ooh. So I guess this is a touchy subject, but it's something I've been wanting to talk about for ages, and it's something I think about like more than I should. So I thought I'd come on and discuss it with you, and you can let me know what you think of yarn snobs and yarn snobbery. I'm just scrolling through Twitter like la 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 la, and I see so much yarn snobbery, like it's unreal. It feels so childish to me. Actually no, it feels so bitchy to me. Yarn snobbery separates people, and that is the exact opposite of what knitting's supposed to do. Knitting's supposed to bring people together. People like what they like, and that's it, okay? End of video. If only. So why does yarn snobbery annoy me? Everyone has their budget set for yarn, and that should not be judged. It's hard to know when you fit into the knitting world when there's yarn snobs around. So you make something amazing, you show the yarn snobs, and because it's acrylic, all of a sudden it's not amazing, which is just so disheartening. Knitting is about bringing people together, and you are knitting. That's all that should matter. Like, that's all that matters, you're knitting. When you see other knitters using fancy yarns, you feel like you should too. It's like it puts a pressure onto you, and somehow it makes you feel like less of a knitter because you're not using nice yarns. Generally, the whole yarn snobbery thing annoys me because people just think they have the right to judge you, and that's the worst thing about it. So you can get hand-dyed yarn and you can get acrylic yarn. So I thought I'd talk about why I like hand-dyed yarn and why I don't, and why I like acrylic yarn and why I don't like acrylic yarn. Guess what? I do like acrylic yarn. There's no notes on that. Why do you not like acrylic yarn? I don't. I like it. So that's that. So why I like hand-dyed yarn is because it's unique. It feels like a treat when you buy it. You get yourself all excited. It's like an experience buying a 25 upwards skein of yarn. It feels like a treat. So I've been knitting for years. I've run this podcast and this channel, and I always forget when I learn. It's about 6 or 7 years, I think, but I could go and check, but I can't be bothered. So every time I go somewhere new now, I get like a skein of yarn from that place, whether it's abroad or like a different place in the UK. I was knitting when I went abroad, but I wasn't properly knitting, so I never got any fancy yarns, which I kind of regret now. But yeah, that's what I do. It's a treat. Buying expensive yarn is a treat. It's like birthday, special occasion, and like that's the only time I'll buy fancy yarn. I don't just buy it because it looks nice. And if you are going to buy it and it's not a special occasion, you feel like you have to have a project in mind. You don't just go and buy this fancy yarn just because it is so expensive. That was why I liked hand-dyed yarn, and it sounds like I don't like it. It's alright. So why I don't like hand-dyed fancy yarn, it's too expensive, like simple as that. I would never buy more than one skein in one go. I would not buy 5 for a jumper or a blanket. It's just way too expensive. I don't want to hand wash the things I've made. Ain't nobody got time for that. The big one is the snobbery that comes with hand-dyed yarn. It's obvious they prefer it. It's obvious they can afford it. It's obvious they think it's better. So they say a lot, the people who buy these yarns, they say a lot without saying anything. But then they become the yarn snobs when they start saying why it's better than acrylic yarn. People who use these fancy smanchy yarns feel like they're better than every other knitter. And with that comes the fact that they think they get the right to judge you if you use acrylic yarn, or something that's not as nice as their yarn. For some reason, it's just like, okay, I use fancy smanchy yarns, I can become a bit of a... They seem so up themselves, and they don't seem or care to understand why you want to use acrylic. They just don't. So I have 2 screenshots to talk about. Like, I love a good screenshot of stuff. This first one, this was ages ago I found this, and I think about it like every other day. Don't judge people for what they can't afford. It's as simple as that. The world is coming to people like you thinking you've got the right to judge people who will buy yarn like that. The emojis used in this, it's just ultimate yarn snobbery. I could say a lot more about this tweet, but I won't. I will say one more thing. Knitting is an expensive hobby. It's a thing that you constantly have to spend money on. So even if you don't have a stash of yarn, you'll make one hat and you use one ball of yarn, and then you'll be like, oh, I've got to go buy 2 more balls of yarn for this project. And it goes on and on and on. You're constantly making things, so you're constantly having to buy yarn. So it's really, really expensive hobby. And yarn goes quite fast. When you make one hat and that's 1 ball of yarn gone. Depending on what you make, yarn can just last for like one project, and that's like maybe a week. So you're going to spend money quite often to be able to knit and do your hobby, the thing that makes you happy. Why I like acrylic yarn? Why I love acrylic yarn? It's cheap. Because it's cheap, you probably tend to have more colours in your stash. So you don't have to go out and buy a new ball of yarn for a new project. So you'll have like a good collection of cheap acrylic DK yarn. It's great for making toys. You can get like 1 or 2 toys out of 1 ball. Chunky acrylic yarn is cheap. Chunky yarn does not go far, and when you're buying like fancy hand-dyed, hand-spun, hand-painted yarns and it's chunky, that cost is going to be so much more than buying fine or DK fancy yarn, because you'll have to buy more of it. It's durable. It's more available than hand-dyed yarn. You don't have to use Etsy, and if you don't shop online, you don't have to go and find a quaint little yarn shop somewhere. You can just pop to your local supermarket, as mentioned that previous tweet. And most charity shops now are selling like brand new balls of yarn for like less than £2, like DK acrylic. You can make large things, jumpers, blankets, other big things, and it won't cost you the earth. You have leftovers that you can turn into fun little scrappy projects. Because it's acrylic and it's all the same fibre content, the thing you make will look really uniform. There won't be stitches that are bigger than other stitches, there won't be different textures. Even though it's all scrappy yarn, it'll come together so it looks like it's one big ball of variegated, which is amazing. You can machine wash it. You don't have to unwind it. You can practice with it. You can learn new stitch, you can learn this in the round, you can learn intarsia, you can learn to crochet if you don't crochet. You don't feel like precious towards this cheap yarn. Maybe you might feel precious, but not as precious as if it was a big fancy ball of hand-dyed stuff. You can play around with it a lot more than you can with the hand-dyed, and basically feel like you're not wasting 30 quid. 25, 30 quid. You feel like you're not wasting a lot of money trying to learn. And as mentioned, why I don't like acrylic yarn, I do like it. That's the end of that. So I want to spend some time on this. I came across this story 2 weeks ago, screenshotted it, and haven't been able to stop thinking about it. The Twitter one was bad. I'm not sure which one's worse. They're both just awful, aren't they? I feel like this one sums up perfectly what I've been trying to explain with yarn snobbery and yarn snobs. The judgment, the privilege, but it's okay because she said lol. Guess what? You could have said no and your great aunt would have taken it to a charity shop where someone would be so chuffed to find that, like a full tote bag of little tiny balls of yarn. I mean, look at the photograph. It looks like nice yarn. It's colourful. It's loads of different colours. It'd be really fun to come across that in a charity shop, and you'd definitely be like, what can I make with this? And you get really, really excited. And I feel like that is so much better than this person's fake happiness. Guess what else? You don't have to feel obligated to take it. You can just say, no, I don't fancy that. I mean, you don't have to say why you don't fancy it. You just say, maybe I've got too much yarn, or no thanks, no, but thank you. Like, you could be really, really nice about it, which I feel would be better, because I feel like maybe this great aunt has obviously knit amazing things. It's a lot of balls of yarn, like little scraps left. She's obviously knitted or crocheted a lot of things with this yarn, and she thought, oh, this would be nice to give because she knits, and maybe she could do like a funny little project, scrappy project. It's like a little heirloom. I feel like the sentiment of this is so nice, and the person who said this was just awful. And if it wasn't for the internet, would she actually have said anything? She might have just taken it and put it on Facebook Marketplace, and that's the end of. Like, you don't have to come on the internet and say, I got this and it sucks, so I gave it to Marketplace for free, lol. Like, it's not funny. You come across as a douchebag. It's just not nice. I mean, I might come across as a bit of douchebag myself, but like, it's just, there's so much more than these two things I've spoken about. There's so much douchebaggery, yarn snobbery, like people being awful. And it does grate on me. I was trying to keep it down here, But the more I talk about it, the more I go up and up and up, because it's so bad, it's so bad. Knitting's supposed to bring people together, it's supposed to be happy, and the main thing it's doing my head in so much is knitting is knitting. You're knitting, that's all that matters. Acrylic, wool, hand-dyed, whatever you're using, who cares? You're making things out of sticks, basically. Like, why does it matter what content it is? One more thing about this lady, right? I wonder if the Facebook Marketplace person who came to collect this got a speech about acrylic yarn and how bad it was. No, because you only say what you really think when you're sat alone at your phone, tapping away, and no one can see it, no one can say anything to you because you're just alone in this stupid little yarn snobbery bubble where no one can pop it and be like, wait, you can't say that. The people who are yarn snobs probably don't see themselves as internet trolls, like internet bullies, trolls. They probably think, I don't know what they think, but they are not being helpful. And the best part of this whole thing, like yarn snobbery, yarn snobs, acrylic, hand-dyed, separating people, bringing people together, like this whole thing. How did people who only use hand-dyed yarn learn to knit? With a cheap acrylic ball out of their grandma's, their mum's, their dad's stash, like a cheap acrylic ball you get so you can learn things, like I mentioned before. So they got a cheap acrylic ball of yarn and they learnt to knit that way. It's like people who forget where they came from. Like, just take a step back and think, oh, and don't be a yarn snob. The moral of this video is you can be a yarn snob as much as you want. You can have yarn snob thoughts, but they're only thoughts. You can't tell other people what you think. You can't give your opinions, especially on the internet, because out of context, you could be making a joke, but it does not look like a joke. And let's be honest, they are not jokes. Because you said lol, because you put emojis, you're still making a really bitchy point that is not funny, and you come across as a right yarn snob. I feel loads better. Whew. I didn't mean to be that annoyed, but I've kept myself down here because I could say a lot more. Like, I do see a lot of yarn snobbery like every other day, but these two are the ones where I'm just like, and that's all I've got to say. Or is it? I could say so much more, and I probably will. Give it another few months and I'll have a lot more content. So thank you for watching, and how do you feel about acrylic yarn, about hand-dyed yarn? Do you see yourself as a yarn snob? It's okay if you are, like I say, just don't give your advice to other people, like, it's okay. I love both. I love the DK and acrylic. I love my hand-dyed. It's just nice to have a variety rather than just using one thing, I think. I could never see myself giving advice on what yarn you should use. You should use whatever makes you happy. Like, that is it. Moral of this video, knitting is happy. It brings people together. And knitting is knitting. Like, just chill out and knit. Like, honestly, it's as simple as that. And if you've got opinions about your hand-dyed yarn, keep them to yourself, or write them in the notebook that no one sees. Like, just get them off your chest, just not to other people or the internet. Okay, thank you for watching, and I'll knit you later. Acrylic. Yeah. Ooh. You.